All right, we are back with another installment of Accepting the Challenges, where we want to give some shine, give some love to educators around the world, allow their story, their journey, and lessons learned along the way to get some shine, and in a lot of ways give teachers their flowers, so to speak, while they're still around and can appreciate them, and allow the world to see just how amazing educators really are in this K through 12 space, from the United States to England to Australia to Spain and everywhere in between. And today we've got a fun guest. This will be good. So also, if you're also a coach and or a basketball fan, this might lean a little heavy with the references into basketball. Just going to go ahead and give you a heads up. So today's guest is Mike Liggett. Mike, go ahead and, if you will, just kind of introduce yourself and tell us what your current role is and kind of where you stand in the education world right now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Like I said, Mike Liggett is my name. It's my 13th year in education. I teach at a small private school in Los Angeles. Been there about 8 years, and I've moved around quite a bit. I taught some in Dallas and taught a little bit in a small suburb in La Cañada, and now I'm at a school near Bel Air. And I coached high school for a number of years. I come from a family of coaches. My dad was a football coach. My brother's a football coach. My sister's a volleyball coach. So giving back to young people has been a big part of my family's history. And I guess you could say I fell right in line with that.
Awesome. So let's go back. Let's go way back. So I have to ask, I guess, before we get started, what position did you play in college?
Well, if I'm going to be completely specific, I played a lot of sitting on the bench, Shane, to be honest with you.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, I guess I'm trying to reference how tall you are.
Yeah. So I'm 6'6". I played small forward. I was doing a lot of jump shots behind the 3-point line.
I understand. So I'm 6'5", so I can understand. I can relate. So long before you were growing, your shoes were, too small for you, and they're growing too fast and all that. Let's go back to where exactly are you from, and where did you grow up?
Yeah, good question. So I had an interesting childhood, actually. My parents split when I was really young, and my dad was living on a cattle ranch in Colorado. He lived in a small town called Lyman, Colorado, and he was kind of the Renaissance man of the town. He ran the local bank. He ran a local cattle ranch. He was a pilot in his free time just for fun, and he was a heck of an athlete. He loved playing basketball, baseball. He was a hell of a golfer. So he did a lot of those kind of things. And I spent my summers with him. And in fact, any vacation I got, that's where I was. So I was running around on a cattle ranch, getting to shoot guns out in the creek and ride horses and fix fence and do all those things with him in the summer. And then in the city, I went to, my mom was always a big fan of education. So I went to some really nice schools in Oklahoma City and spent most of the school year in the city. So my dad used to joke with me. He'd say, I'm sad that your mom and I aren't together anymore. But he goes, you get the best of both worlds. You get to, learn what city life is like and then go spend time in the country.
Yeah, no doubt. Sounds like a very interesting guy.
He was. He's a very, very charismatic guy. He could definitely entertain the room.
Well, yeah, he's got such a wide range array of stories that he probably can pull from all of those different experiences. So how did you get into education? Was it just naturally progressed? Did you I know you referenced your family a minute ago, but was there a teacher along the way that kind of stood out and you were like, man, that right there is what I want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So no, education was not my first choice. I mean, like I was telling you before, I was a basketball player. So, I wanted to play D1 college ball. That was my big dream. And so everything I was doing was geared towards making that dream happen. And like I said, my mom was a big fan of education, and she sent me to all these really great private schools. She was a single mom and somehow found a way during the latter years of my high school time to do really well in business and send me to a really great school. And I have to laugh at it now because, you know, she really wasn't crazy about the idea of me being a teacher. She really didn't want me to, because teachers didn't make a lot of money. And she's like, are you sure you want to do this? And, you know, I ended up doing business. But it was funny because I was at these great schools and I had these amazing teachers who I wanted to be just like, you know. And I told her later, I said, you know, it's pretty ironic that you wanted me to go be in the business world and make all this money. You put me around all these cool people that I wanted to be like. And this is what I end up doing with my life. To answer your question though, I had one teacher. His name was Mr. Davis. He was a math teacher who just happened to be a big basketball fan, but he would show up to school every day at 6:30 to help kids with math. And I'll never forget, I had a D when I first transferred to the school. I had a D- in math, and I was so embarrassed. And my mom's like, "You're going in for extra help. It's going to happen." So I'm walking in there thinking I'm going to be there with all the other not smart kids, you know, just totally ashamed of myself. I walk in the door. Everybody in there is the smart kids. There were people in that room that went to Yale, that went to Princeton, you name it. And that's when it dawned on me. I think, oh, this is what the smart kids do. They go get extra practice. That's how this works.
Yeah.
It's
so
interesting. Yeah. And then so Mr. Davis really made a huge impression on me. I wanted to really be there for other people and be a positive influence like he was. And then I got into the business world and I just hated it.
What did you do?
I got into banking. My dad ran the bank. My family, we had a bank in our family for about 100 years, and just would pass it down. And I was next in line. And so they put me in the flagship branch, and I'm, you know, hustling, trying to move my way up the ladder. And I just hated it. I just couldn't stand it. I mean, I was living in Colorado, going skiing on the weekends, having fun with friends, and I was miserable. And I thought, okay, I need to make a change.
Yep. So
I went to grad school, and that's where they let me teach. They let me teach undergraduate classes, and it just didn't feel like work. I was teaching all day, taking grad school classes till like 9:30 at night, and I had never been happier. And I was like, okay, this is for me.
Wow. Definitely the opposite of me. I'm not. You've set me in the class, and yeah, I struggle to read a book these days. If it's not an audio book and I can't do it while I'm also doing something else, I can't consume it. So so tell me about so you teach science.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you teach science. So you went back, got a degree not only in teaching something. You didn't even go hey, I'm going to be the stereotype jock and go teach PE. And did that ever cross your mind, or was science just kind of always?
Well, you know, that's a good question. I wanted to get into something sports related. So I started taking classes on biomechanics, anatomy, motor behavior, motor development, exercise physiology, and I really geeked out on the human body and, you know, things that PE coaches normally do study. But, you know, I wanted to find a way to merge both of them. And it was funny. I was playing on a club sports team, and I ran into one of my old coaches, and he goes, "What are you doing next year?" And I said, "Well, I want to coach. And he goes, "Well, we have a teaching fellowship program where we'll train you how to teach. We're going to pair you with a master teacher for 6 weeks. Somebody's been teaching 20 years plus.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll put you with the math teacher for 6 weeks. Then we'll put you with the science teacher for 6 weeks, and then language arts." And he said, "If I get you the interview, will you interview?" He said, "I need an assistant coach really bad." And he goes, "You would be a perfect shoe-in for it." So he was really persistent and got me the interview. And luckily, they offered me the job, and I haven't looked back ever since.
That's awesome. So, so do you currently coach basketball there at the high school you're at now?
I haven't. I don't. Our school is small. It's K-6. I haven't done it in a while, and mainly because logistics. Los Angeles is such a busy place, as I'm sure you're aware. And
sure.
The school that I'm at is an amazing place. I have stuck around there because of the community and the kids and the families there. I just haven't been able to find. I mean, I've taught at 4 other schools, and I had 2 reasons. One, I found a guy that I wanted to teach just like. That's where really science took a hold of me. As I saw this guy, I went on a tour of the school that I'm at, and there were children running down the halls, sprinting to get into his classroom. And I saw all of these neat
That
things.
never happens.
Right? Exactly. And I was like, okay. And by then I had been teaching a few years, and
Yeah.
I was
You went
naive.
trying to
I was
figure out how to get them to run to your classroom.
Yeah, I was 25 years old thinking, well, I'm a pretty good teacher and they don't do that in
Yeah.
my class. So what's going on?
Yeah.
And it was so funny. Like I walk in there and he's got like every animal skeleton you can imagine, and a fish, this fish that's actually we still have, that's like 12 pounds and huge. And he's making things blow up in the classroom and telling these stories. He's a diver, so he's like swimming into a barrel sponge. And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I thought I was a good teacher. I need to go work with this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So lo and behold, I promised myself, I said, if anything ever opens up at this school, I'm going to apply. And lo and behold, a year later, something opened up. And I said, I want you to be my mentor. I want you to teach me how you do this, because I hadn't seen anything like it. And I was like, okay, I have got to learn how to make science an experience like this guy does.
Yeah. And I think that can, I mean, while it's definitely more difficult because you don't have the visuals necessarily in other subjects, that stands out to me that you put it that way, because I think if a lot of educators looked at it that way, it would make the engagement with the child obviously
Mhm.
happen a lot more. So that's awesome. So is he still there? Is he still there teaching?
He just retired last year. So I
Oh,
got to spend 7 years with him, two of which I was his main assistant. And then I went and taught fourth grade, just self-contained. But I was always in his ear. And he and his wife both taught there. And he said, Mike, I have built this program. We have a canyon on campus, and he actually built the trails that are in our canyon. And like he literally built it from scratch. And he goes, I feel good handing off the baton to you. And I was very humbled when he said that. I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do it the way you do. But the fact that you're okay leaving me your life's work means a whole lot to me. And that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, he would keep saying to me, Mike, you've got to make this learning, you've got to make this valuable and fun for them. If you don't make it fun, they're not going to pay attention.
I'm actually looking at the pictures of it now. It's an absolutely beautiful place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a heck of a place. I mean, you don't get tired of the view. I'll put it that way.
Oh no, I'd say not. Man, that makes it easy to come to work every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, it's an amazing story, and I think it's awesome that he was willing to. Was he reluctant? Was he hard on you? What kind of mentor was he?
Ooh, that's a good question. So his name's Chris Bartell. Chris was the kind of guy that he was a over preparer type of a person. So he wouldn't put the kids through anything that he hadn't been through himself, or he wasn't willing to put me through. So I'd walk in the door and he'd be like, okay, you're going to go do this today. Let's go down into the canyon and I'm going to tell you 10 different plants. And by the end of the hike, you need to know all 10. What? Or he'd pull out 5 sticks and he'd say, I want you to get all these 5 popsicle sticks from this end to the other end of the room. There's about 25 feet. Figure out a way to do it. It's possible. And you got to figure it out. So I'm sitting there just struggling, frustrated. If I had hair on my head, I'd be pulling it out.
Sure.
And he would do this little thing where he liked productive struggle. He'd put me through the ringer, but very subtly, he'd give me a compliment every now and again, or give me a little hint to have me move forward just a little tiny step until I got it. And when you finally get it, which is the same thing that happens to the kids, when they finally get it, they are just elated. So there's that delicate balance of, okay, I'm going to make this hard, but I'm going to put you in a position to be successful.
Well, and I think so. You hit the nail on the head. It's what he's actually a master at is actually teaching, and
Right.
that's what he was doing. He was teaching you no different than he teaches anybody,
Right.
No matter any age. Because if you actually can teach it, you can teach it, right? Like so, it's kind of, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like coaching basketball, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
a good coach can teach, somebody 30 or somebody 4, how to do the basics, how to do those things, and
Yeah.
So having being that he wasn't necessary, being that he was a little bit, um, a little bit, we'll call it, like you said, a productive struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Was your sports background help you better prepare for that?
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, I played for a program. I played for Kelvin Sampson at Oklahoma, and
Mm-hmm.
that experience was so hard. I mean, I just talked to him the other day, and I was like, Coach, I was miserable, like in the best way possible. As an adult now, I can see that, but it was such a struggle. And we had some really good years. I mean, we had a Final Four year, we had an Elite Eight year. I mean, we were really good, but it was just such a grind. And all he kept saying was, "We've got to find a way to get better today. We've got to find a way to get better today." And with that, I thought, okay, like I have to be obsessive about this skill set. I have to be willing to embrace adversity. That was the big thing. Embrace adversity. So anytime something hard happened, I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep putting my head to the grindstone and figure this out, because I'm not going to quit.
Sure.
And that's really, what you're trying to do with the kids. It's elementary school age children, right? It's fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. So it's scaffolded, but I'm still sitting there going, guys, I'm going to give you little pieces here and there, but you're the one that has to put the puzzle together. I'm not going to do it for you.
Yeah. That's the beauty of I'm a big fan of escape rooms, because it's like there's like you're given just enough hint to figure it out, but you have to go through it. And I won't dive too much into it, but the best one that I've ever experienced was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it's like there's 4 different rooms, and you're trying to defuse this nuclear missile. It's most lifelike thing I've ever experienced in my life. What year did you graduate at Oklahoma?
2005.
2005. So yeah, so I think you were there when Jay was there. So Jason Aker was there so he was there in 2004, 2005 as a GA.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
So yeah. So Jay is there. No, that's all right. And Jay, he's actually the head coach at Oklahoma Baptist now. So
Really?
him and Coach Sampson are really, really good friends. He played at Oklahoma Baptist when he was a player, and he went on. He's coached at Liberty and Mercer and some different places, and now he's back over there. So, but yeah, so the basketball. So, so let me ask you this: what does your dad think now that you're you're this mentor under Mr. Wizard here? Because I guess the younger people may not. Do you remember Mr. Wizard on TV?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it wasn't my big thing, but I do remember
Yeah,
a little
Mr. Wizard.
bit.
I guess for those listening who aren't familiar, Mr. Wizard was kind of like that late '80s, early '90s version of like Bill Nye the Science Guy and that kind of thing. But yeah, what you're teaching now. Here you are doing this thing. Nothing like working on the ranch, nothing like flying planes, and nothing like running a bank. What I mean I'm sure he's excited or happy for you or thrilled or.
It's funny you say that. My mother has had a chance to substitute at the school.
Oh wow!
And yeah, she finally moved out to LA. She's like, oh, I realized you aren't coming back to Oklahoma, so she moved out to LA, and
she saw why.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and she loves the school too. So she's been a substitute there for about 3 years now, and she's had the opportunity to sub, with me in my room. And she says, what's interesting about watching you teach? She goes, you remind me so much of your father when you teach. She's like, you have some of my qualities, but she goes, in the classroom with the kids, you are your father's son. And she said the same thing when I coach. And, I felt like my dad was like way up here. He was just the most charismatic guy in the room, and everybody wanted to talk to him. And I think, my dad unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago, but he did get a chance to at least hear about what my teaching was like and what my coaching was like. And, obviously if we had a good record or a good game, I'd always call him and tell him. And he really enjoyed the fact that I was doing it for the same reasons he was. Like his coaching stipend was a joke. I'm sure you know about that. Sure. Like the coaching stipends, you don't do it for the money.
Actually, you're not even. You probably by the time taxes are taken out and your gas, you're not making anything.
Yeah, you're taking your time away from your family at night, and it's at least 2 or 3 hours of time. But you affect young people in such an important way, and I think that's what he was most proud of. And what I think the proof of that is the fact that most of my siblings are doing the exact same thing. We're all sharing what we learned when we were their age and basically improved the skill set over time. And it's like, okay, we're gonna keep the progression moving forward and mentor some people and teach them some important life lessons through sport, which is one of the better teachers of life, in my opinion.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. So let me ask you this: you pick up the phone and you call yourself 13 years ago. You're getting started on this journey. What are some things that you share with yourself about this professional journey that you're about to take on?
Good question. When I first started, I was just kind of happy to have a job. I mean, I'll never forget, my first job was right in the middle of the recession. And I remember thinking, how in the world did I pull this off? And I remember filling out my cover letters and everything, and I really just wanted to connect with kids. And that's been the foundation of most of my teaching. I really didn't think I was going to get anywhere with a child unless they knew how much I cared about them and I could establish a relationship with them, which is step one. But over the years, Google's right in front at our fingertips. We can access any piece of information we want, anytime we want. Teachers saying to us when we were kids, "You're not going to have a calculator in your pocket." Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
We do now. So what life is about now is really building a skill set for these kids and teaching them how to problem solve. And that's probably the first thing I would say. It's like, look, you need to be a part of teaching these young people how to problem solve. You need to be a part. Yes, establish a connection with them. That's number one. But you're not done there. You need to start giving them a skill set, building their confidence, and teaching them how to problem solve. I mean, we've got multiple hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. We've got wildfires out here in California. Like, the next generations are going to deal with problems, and it's up to us to get them ready for that, and be able to make the world a better place. And I think once you figure out that life is about progress and you're supposed to be progressing the narrative, that's your job, whether it's with your kids or the kids you're teaching or coaching, it's a lot easier to kind of find your place in the world when you do that. So that would probably be the most important piece of advice I would share with myself 13 years ago.
Man, I think that's valuable advice, and I think you said it right. Being progressive sometimes takes on a negative connotation, but especially from where you're from, right? Like compared to where you're at now, right? Mm-hmm. You tell somebody you're progressive, they're going to tell you you've become a hippie and you're hanging out in California and these things. But that even in itself is the progression, right? Like you have to. I call it being curious. I think some of the greatest leaders, some of the greatest teachers, they're curious. They're students in a way, and in a lot of ways, doing this podcast for me is the same way, right? Like I'm not going to go I'm not going to sit down and get a college degree. The only way I ever get one if somebody honorarily makes me, something, right? So, but I get so much out of just talking to people and meeting new people, and that's where me traveling around the world has allowed me to do. And the other cool part about that is that's what sports does, right? Sports a lot, like it forces you in a room with basketball, right? It forces you in a room with 14 other guys that are all from completely different backgrounds, completely different social economics, sometimes even different countries. And you have 3.5 months to figure this out and figure out how to be a team and go be the best one that exists. That, on paper, when you put it that way, is the most craziest, off-the-wall thing you could ever do. But I think maybe that's why I love escape rooms, right? It's essentially the same thing. It's like we're gonna put these random people in here and you have to solve a problem, right? You have to use whatever you have to solve this problem. And it's awesome to hear you explain it that way. What about any time in your journey where you were like, oh man, what have I got myself into?
I think as teachers, we have those days often. Even when we first started doing remote teaching,
sure.
Oh my gosh, it was the kids looked exhausted, and it's like, how am I going to be able to finish the curriculum and make this engaging? Or maybe you have someone that's just like, I've had multiple kids that could not get through the door to their desk. They just couldn't do it. They would be walking around with their backpack, socializing with somebody, and then they drop this here, and they the desk falls over here, and they're chatting it up with someone, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to hang out with this guy every day or this girl every day. And then and like you had said earlier when we were talking, it's those kids that you put your heart and soul into, and then they come back. Because luckily for me, that's part of the reason why I love my school. The kids come back. They love the place so much. We have this big off to college reunion where kids that have gone to our school are headed off to college, and the entire class comes back, and you get to see the finished product.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, I had a year with you, or I had 2 or 3 years with you, and I was like, I don't know if this guy's or this girl's gonna make it, And then when you see the finished product, you're like, wow, you have turned into such a cool person, and I got to be a part of that. It may have been small, but having the opportunity to, like I said earlier, be a part of that progression and that development is just the coolest feeling. And I have never gotten tired of it. It's been, I run into some of my students that are graduated from college now, and I'm like, wow, like you have turned into such a cool person. I'm so excited that you have your act together and you're doing well, and I got to be a part of that.
Yeah. What's that? It's that altruistic affirmation that you're doing good in the world, right? Very few careers we can do, and very few things we can do out in the world where we actually feel like we're actually doing some good, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're in sales, you're selling something. I'm doing it to make some money. I'm going to make as much money as possible. That's what I'm trying to do here. And so it sounds like that's probably why you had that drive to not do banking. Not that banking can't be fulfilling in ways, but you have that altruistic drive to be able to make an immediate impact on people. And what more powerful way to do it than to do it with young people? Because that.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of times for young people, they need to be put in an environment where they feel safe, where they feel, especially elementary school, it's a place where we have to build them up. Because as I'm sure you remember, middle school, high school, man, those years are tough.
Oh, middle school really is maybe tough. The most. Middle school is like going into prison for 2 years.
Right,
It's like,
right. It's a trying time, and Chris, like I was telling you about earlier, Chris, he's the one who really helped me realize that. He goes, our job is to build them up. He's like, they're going to have enough people tearing them down. We've got to put them in a position where they feel good about themselves. They feel good about their ability to learn. And I try to use that as my anchor. Like, I really don't want to ever deviate from that, no matter what new teaching method comes out there, whatever's in vogue. Like, as long as I'm giving them something that's valuable and they feel good about themselves and their ability to learn, I'm doing something good. And like I was saying earlier, being a teacher, you do deal with the nitty gritty with, some of these ups and downs of these kids throughout the years. And then to stick with them during their hard times, to really be with them when things are kind of ugly, and help them through it. I think that's a lot of times the most rewarding part of being a teacher. Is you're like, look, you may not have been an A+ student, but I helped you get through some trying times, and now you're stronger for it. So a lot of times that is I guess maybe that's part of it. When you struggle, you actually understand the real value of something.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Which is interesting you say that, and I don't mean to keep referencing back, but that's what stuck out in my head when you were telling me about your dad, a guy who essentially owns a bank, but now also is going out and working on the farm and doing all this stuff that he does not have to do. Right. And I would say for him, in a way, that was his way of keeping balance and allowing him to appreciate the things that he does have in his life. Because it's, because the reality of it is he probably didn't have to work if he didn't want to work. He probably, those things, I'm assuming.
No,
but
it was all joy for him.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it was that was, some people would think he's crazy, right? But he knew who he was, and he knew he had to keep stoking that fire to feel that motivation. And that's, it is. So I can see what there's a lot of things that come out, just based on what little you've shared about your dad. I can definitely see that. come out. And that's awesome that you either pick that up either through DNA or whatever it is, or just from, the environmental thing of, of being around, because we've all heard the stories of the opposite of kids who grow up in your situation and go completely the other way. And you're in a city right now that is full of that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's interesting. Man, it's interesting to hear. So I'm curious, and you said something, and I almost lost it. So the gentleman, Chris was his name. That right? That's that the guy you menteed with. So
Mm-hmm.
how did he handle the shift to online, and was he still able to keep the engagement, and he was able to do that? So I gotta hear, because you've hyped him up about
Yeah.
an in-person experience. I gotta hear how it was.
You know, I've never met anybody else that's such a perfectionist that found a way. I mean, technology was not his thing. I mean, he did well enough, but it's definitely something that was harder for him. He was better when he was in the room, which is probably true for most of us teachers, but him especially. Sure. He was not a fan of teaching online, but he was such a perfectionist that he insisted on doing it well, even if it meant putting in a lot more time. So he found a way. I mean, granted, when you walk into this guy's house, because we were all sequestered in our homes, this guy's house looks like a museum. So he had plenty of material to use, and his wife, they're both science teachers. So he would film these elaborate things that he would do. He actually went straight to the classroom as soon as we got quarantined, and he brought home buckets and buckets of things to do demos with. And every day he would do another demo and video it, and multiple times to make sure he got it just right. And luckily we got quarantined right around spring break time. So we had about 2 weeks to prepare. And that's pretty much what we did over spring break, was just prepare. And we pre-videoed and we ran through it with each other. And we did the same thing. We just recorded the videos and put them online, and had to get really creative and go, okay, hopefully you have some rubber bands in your house, and hopefully you have such and such in your house, and try and do this experiment. And he was a champ. I was so impressed. And his big thing with teaching was, first thing he said to me when I really asked him, like, how am I going to be able to hold their attention? He goes, first of all, Mike, teaching in elementary school is not teaching. It's a performance. Mm-hmm. You've got to hold their attention. He goes, so that means you're going to have to change gears about every 8 to 10 minutes. If you don't, you're going to lose them, and the entire lesson's going to flop. You don't want to do that. So we would have to find ways in remote teaching to completely change gears and keep them entertained on a computer every 8 to 10 minutes. And I was just continually impressed with how creative he was. He said, okay, well, for this, 5 or 10 minutes, let's take a poll. Let's have everybody do a poll here. And then we'll put everybody in breakout groups for this discussion and ask you this question. And check out this cool video that I did. And look at me swimming in, with this whale shark. And you're like, God, this guy, he's getting like 3 or 4 lessons in one day or one lesson for most people. And he's just jam-packed full of new things to keep them stimulated.
Sounds like he earned his pay.
He did.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Man, that's awesome. How big? Tell me what you've experienced, because I think, and I guess I'll get to what I'm saying first. I think that way more men need to go into education. I think it is something that, for a multitude of different reasons, both for the interaction for kids who maybe don't have a dad, to the security that may come with that, of a kid feeling safe at school, and that not that they can't feel safe with women, but just the natural human instincts of a kid and being right, especially in elementary school. Were there any challenges that you encountered into that, coming into a female dominated world, coming in?
Yeah. I would have to say this. I can only speak to my experience personally. I've worked with a lot of really good teachers over the years. I've been lucky to have a lot of mentors, some of which were women. And one of my favorite co-teachers I ever taught with, her name was Joan Friedman. She's at the school that I teach at now. And she had echoed those sentiments. She goes, we need more males in elementary education. She goes, it's just so nice for them to have the balance of both. And I felt very lucky because the women I worked with really knew that and appreciated my presence. They wanted me there. They wanted more males there. They really valued what men brought to the workplace. And you know, I'm a rarity. I think there's 4 or 5 of us in the whole school, and there's like, you know, 40, 50 teachers. So I didn't really have any troubles. I really didn't. They were very welcoming and excited to have a male, and wanted my perspective. You know, it was interesting. The first year or two I was there, I didn't speak up a lot in meetings, and I finally had a couple people come up to me and say, Mike, you've got to talk more. You've got to talk more. We need your voice in these meetings.
Yeah.
And from senior teachers, not from you know, people that have been there a year or two. It was from people that have been there like 20, 25 years. I'm like, well, if they're telling me to speak up, then I probably should.
Sure. So what? So let's say some first year, second year male teachers, or somebody may listen to this and they're thinking about going into it. What are some tips you can give? Because there is a transition, right? You came out of a locker room that's testosterone overload, and you know, male, and
plenty of curse words, things of that nature.
And you know, it's the locker room behavior that only stays in the locker room, like it's the jokes and the pranks and the all that. When you go into the real world, that doesn't work, right? And we have to tone that down when we get into the real world anyway. But there are certain ways that you can't go about things in a school, right? And I'm not even talking about the female aspect of it. I'm talking about what are some things that are a transition, because it's not an environment that's, and this is different than the world, which I think is a great thing. It's not an environment that's built by men or really, you know, upheld by men. So the women kind of rule the roost, right?
Yep.
So it's coming in. And what are some tips you can give to maybe some of those first year male educators or guys that are just thinking about going into education about, hey, here's the transition. Here's some things you don't have to worry about. You might think you need to worry about this. You don't need to worry about this, and those kind of things.
Yeah, that's a good question. Being a male on a campus with mostly female teachers, when you're a male teacher, the children are going to probably gravitate to you. I mean, I told you, I'm 6'6". I'm a big guy.
Yeah, well,
and
you stick out. Yeah, naturally anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They do not have a problem running up to you, grabbing your legs, grabbing your fingers, you know, like asking you questions. You're going to get asked, you know, how tall are you? Probably 4 or 5 times a day, things like that. And I would say you have to kind of embrace that they want some of that male energy around you. You're going to have, I don't want to say a target on your back, but you're going to be on stage a little bit. You're going to have a spotlight on you. Yeah. And people are going to pay attention, especially the kids. I mean, they will look up to you, whether you want it or not. And you have to be willing to embrace that or look forward to it. And that was part of the thing that I don't know if I was completely aware of it until I got in the environment. I was like, oh my gosh, like they see everything I do. They're going to pay attention to what I'm wearing. They're going to pay attention to like what kind of sunglasses I have. They want to know about my shoes. Like they pay attention to how I walk. Like if I pick up a ball, please throw me the ball. You know, how far can you throw it? That kind of stuff. Like they're going to measure themselves against you for everything. And for them, it's just part of like growing up and being curious. Because I mean, I don't know what some of the other schools are like, but a lot of our dads, they work a lot. You know, they're providing for their families, and they may not see their dads as much as they'd like. So you being there is an opportunity for them to get to know a male adult. And then the other thing is be prepared to be a growth education teacher, because there's not that many males on campus, so you will get approached. And say, hey, could you mind sitting in on this talk about puberty and blah, blah, blah. I would say, and this goes for both genders, but you really have to be prepared to be a role model in your community too. I mean, I see my students everywhere I go. I mean, I had knee surgery about 1.5 years ago, so I would run into 3 or 4 students at my PT clinic every single visit. I see them at the farmer's market. I see them at the grocery store. Like you have to be ready for them to see you everywhere, and you know, be okay with that.
Yeah. It's funny. So I gotta ask, do you have kids?
I do not.
Okay, so you don't have kids. So it's funny you talk about the kids and your first initial reaction of them running up, asking questions, all of that thing. So if you ever do end up having kids, let me just go ahead and tell you that is exactly what being a dad is 90% of the time, all the time in your house, no matter what it is. What is this, Dad? Why are you doing that? What are you watching? What is that? What's he wearing? What's his name? What's he doing? Like that is the curious mind of a kid. And I'll tell you a funny little story. So growing up, I grew up, I didn't have much, right? So there are a couple things that I associated with wealth or success, and that was things like nice wine or cologne. I
Mhm.
always noticed being around successful people, and you smell them, right? They call it smell of success, right?
Yeah.
So I have become over my years, over the last 20 years, I have become very much a cologne aficionado, right? Like I don't like smelling like, when I was a single guy, I don't want, I don't never wanted a girl to say, oh, well, my ex-boyfriend, he smelled. No, he does not smell what I have. He doesn't even know where to get what I have, right? So it's those things. So I have now not near the collection that I used to have, but I have it. So my son is 3, almost 4, and here recently, I don't know if it's something developed, like his olfactory nose has just become like this. He's like a hound dog. Like everything is smelling. So he spotted so this is like my little office area, and my colognes stay on a shelf over here to the side, and he has the bottles, they're shiny, and he's like, oh, what is that? So now, the other day, he wanted to smell, well, tell me what this is, and he's smelling it. He's like, oh, and he's rattling off some of the notes because he can pick up some of them. And he goes through. So here lately, he's like, well, I want to smell good. Every time I give him a hug, you smell good. So he's always saying it. So now before nighttime, and you would have just missed it before we did this whole transition of him coming down here. Now it's like, can I smell your? He calls them potions. I've told him
Mhm.
colognes 1,000 times, and he goes through and he says, and not a scent. He calls it a sentence. He's like, what's the sentence of this one? I was like, a scent. He's like, no, it's a sentence. I was like, son, it's not a sentence. So we go through. So now I have to so now he wants one sprayed on him before he goes to bed. So here I've got a really nice bottle of cologne that every night now he's wanting me to spray a little bit on his chest before he goes so he can lay in bed and he can smell. But it's probably making him feel calm and feel
Right.
safe, and he's there and to go
Yeah.
through. And I told my wife, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it till Christmas
I
time.
was
I'm
gonna
just gonna
say
go.
that sounds expensive.
Yeah, I was like this. I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it till Christmas time. Just a heads up. So what we're trying to do is they make like some kids like Spider Man, Iron Man, different ones. But the problem is, I don't know if he's gonna enjoy how they smell based on what I got. So I'm in a predicament. But that's just a story into my world and what being a dad is like. Cologne is. I do not advise getting your 3-year-old son hooked on fragrances that early because one of you is going to go without, and it's probably not going to be you.
Well,
So,
he'll probably be more of a connoisseur than you are when he gets older.
well, so I'm not going to lie to you. There's a part of me that's like, man, if he gets to high school and he's still in the colognes, he's gonna be my guy. Like, cause
Yeah.
I'm gonna be good and older now. He's my youngest, so I'm 40. So by the time he's in high school, I'm gonna be getting a little bit older. So I won't be into the same stuff I'm into now. But yeah, he'll have one heck of a collection,
Yeah.
and he'll have some stuff. He'll be yeah he'll he yeah, the guys around him will not be able to compete when it comes to
Right.
that. That is for sure.
Well, it's
But
funny you say that because I'm at that point, like being a basketball player, I'm sure you know this. Shoes are such a thing for basketball players, right? I
yeah,
mean, that's such a point of status and excitement. And like every single one
first
of my
thing you
team,
notice.
oh,
First thing you
totally.
notice.
Everything.
Yeah.
Like anywhere I go, it's the first thing I look at. And, I've always considered myself a shoe connoisseur. Like I have several pairs of Jordans, Kobe's,
Okay.
you name it, I have it. And I have finally been surpassed by the kids. So that's what I
Oh
do now.
man.
If I want to know about something new and cool, I go talk to them. And that's
Stockings.
how I get my street cred. That's how I
Stock,
get my street cred with the kids. Yes.
StockX
Oh
is
yeah.
what ruined it. Now,
Oh yeah.
because it gave everybody access to
Hmm.
all the things that typically only adults had access to, or if you couldn't get to a store
Right.
and look for.
Like
Yeah,
them and Goat have ruined it for all of us.
yeah,
And it's funny now. I'm like, all right, tell me what kind of Jordans those are. All right, just tell me where you got them.
yeah,
Tell me how much they were.
yeah.
And it's funny if I have a new pair on, which very rarely do I get a new pair, but I will get one every now and again. And that's where I get my street cred from. I'll get my first compliment from them if I got a new pair of Jordans on. They're like, those are so cool. And to be honest with you, that's a bit of I was going to say, I noticed those in the
Yeah,
background
yeah.
right away.
So when I give talks, shoes. So I don't give a talk like most people give a talk. I I, I prefer to make people feel comfortable. So I'll typically show up in a hoodie and then some jeans or some chinos or something and some shoes that are the loudest, crazy. Not like crazy, but like they're fashionable shoes, and typically Jordans of some type or whatever. I didn't. I bought my first pair of Jordans 2.5 years ago. They're never a thing for me. I was in the corporate world for so long, and then I had my own business, and then I was traveling so much. I was like, man, I'm not gonna have a nice pair. I'm not gonna. I'm on the plane all the time. I'm
Yeah.
mess them up, and then it got to the point where I actually wear mine. So this is actually the only pair that I don't wear, but when I go and give a talk or if I'm going and because the kids are going to notice it straight away. Oh man, where'd you get those?
Yeah.
Like what are those? And
Yeah.
so yeah, that for me is thankfully I talk too, so I get to write them off on my taxes and that
Nice.
and that fun stuff. So yeah, so it is. So I don't buy very often, but when I do, it is for the appeal or the costume, I guess you will, of where it is. And it's funny you bring that up. So I think this actually ties into the last question I had, and that's a great tip for guys coming into the classroom because you might be trying to figure out how can I engage with these people? How
Mhm.
can these kids? How can I get them to just? I gotta because engagement really is. It's not their job to have a common bond with you. It's your job to have a common bond with them.
Right.
And Mike hit it on the head. If you can figure out a pair of shoes, you will you can get every boy's attention in that school and some of the girls. You can get their attention really quick just by walking down the hall. You find you get a hold of a pair that's hard to find, or you happen to hit it on the app when they release it that they sell out within 2 minutes of coming on. You happen to hit it and you walk down the hall, you could have the attention and share whatever needs to be shared to make sure that every kid gets it by
Mhm.
being in the classroom. That's a great I'm glad you brought that up. That's what comes out of this is that
Mhm.
that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, and it's completely true. I mean, if I invest in a pair of shoes, it's like I'm not usually not wearing those when I'm hanging out on the weekends. I'm wearing them at school because that's how I can grab their attention. Now, granted, it's genuine. I mean, I am a shoe person. I love
Sure.
shoes, but
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
of
not I'm
course.
not wearing those. I'm not wearing those with my buddies. I'm wearing them around the kids because that's what they get excited about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And man, that's awesome. That may be the most valuable tip we've shared in any of it. And it's very real. Like we're not just hyping it up like it is. If you're a male teacher and you don't believe us, reach out to me, reach out to Mike. We'll give you some suggestions. And by the way, they're not that expensive. Like these shoes didn't cost me any more than if I go to the store right now and buy a pair of shoes. Like they're
Right.
not. You just got to know where to look for them. You got to know when to shop for them. But you put on a nice fresh pair of Jordans and you walk into a classroom. The first time you do it, and if you haven't been doing it, they might look at you like, man, what's he trying to do? Like, is he got a new girlfriend? Like, what's going on here? Like, what's he doing? But you do that on a semi-regular basis to kind of get their attention. Oh man, you'll have them hooked. You
Hmm.
because you'll be able to break down that barrier, going with it. So,
Hmm.
Mike, listen, this has been great. This has been really really good. I would actually we're gonna do some collaborative sessions at some point where I'm gonna have other. So we might have some other science teachers from like we might have one from Australia. We might have from another country. I'd love to maybe have you on and kind of do a group group conversation as well. I think I think you got a good energy about you, and I think that would be really good.
I appreciate that, Shane. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I've enjoyed the conversation. So, yeah, I mean, I might learn a little something. So, yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So how we typically wrap these up is I typically ask two personal questions for you, just so the listeners or viewers can just get a little bit more insight into who you are. And then I've been sitting on your side of the fence, and a lot of people in the early recordings that we've done of this, I was asked, "Hey Shane, I've got questions I would have liked to have asked you at the end of that. Maybe that's something you can add at the end of it." So I'm actually going to allow you at the end of this to ask me a question before we wrap it up. So my first question I'm going to ask um, is I got all right. So I've got them. So my first question is, we all know teachers. They, you have to fill in for somebody every now and then. You got to miss your planning period. You got to miss your lunch. The day it never goes how it's supposed to go in a school building. What is your number one go-to snack in the room?
Ooh, that's a good question. So, actually, this may not help a lot of people, but it works for me.
That's all right.
So, living in Los Angeles, we have access to some of the best, most fresh produce in the world. When I was living in Oklahoma and somebody got excited about a piece of fruit, I'd look at them like they were crazy. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? Like, I had a friend of mine from Texas go, "Why does anybody like honeydew melon? It tastes like cardboard." And I'm like, "Well, you haven't had it out here." But there are these very specific Fuji apples that you can get at a farmer's market, and they literally, it's either that or if it's white peach season, that's what I'll go to.
Wow.
There's a very specific apple, and I try to eat pretty healthy because I'm still trying to be somewhat of an athlete, Shane,
Yep,
even though
yep,
I'm a little
yep.
older.
Well, wait till you get
Um,
married and you have kids. That
oh
stuff
man.
goes out. Then it becomes survival mode.
Well,
Yeah.
I know I've only got a few years left, so I'm trying to push it as long as I can.
Yeah. Well,
But there,
enjoy it.
there's a specific type of Fuji apple that
Okay.
a farm called Arnett Farms. There's a local farmers market that they sell them, and I'll tell you what, man, they will change your life the second you try one. And that's
Wow.
my go-to.
Okay.
Yeah, I would not have said that if I was still teaching in Dallas. It
No, that's
probably would have
okay.
been a Snickers bar or something like that. But
That's all right. So, if you could teach, I know you love your job and I know you love where you're
mm-hmm,
at, but
mm-hmm.
if you could go do what you do anywhere in the world, where would you go?
That's a great question. You know, I used to be the kind of guy that when I grew up in Oklahoma City, don't get me wrong, it was a great childhood and I enjoyed my time in Colorado as well. Um, I always wanted to travel, always wanted to be out there seeing the world, seeing what was out there. The second I'll never forget this, I was doing a coaching clinic in Malibu, California, which is just up the road from me now.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun was going down. It was about 60 degrees and it was in the middle of July. And it just felt like everything started to glow. And I'm like, what in the world is this? And I thought, all right, this is where I'm moving. I'm going to be right here as long as humanly
Okay.
possible. So I love being here. Now I won't lie. If I ended up in Maui or something, that'd be all right with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But man, being here, getting to see, I live in Santa Monica now. It took me 10 years to get here, but I'm finally in Santa Monica. I can go see the sunset whenever I want. I can go get my feet in the sand. I'm 2 miles from the water. That's really it. I mean, it's kind of a boring answer, but being right
No, the answer is the
here,
answer.
oh,
Yeah.
it's such a cool opportunity to live in this city and be so close to work. It's really neat.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So before we wrap it up, I'm going to turn the stage over to you and allow you to ask me a question, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah. So I would say you having the opportunity to speak to so many different educators and administrators, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
there's got to be some common threads with really good teachers. Have you found any that really have resonated that are like, wow, most of the good ones usually do X, or most of the good ones usually mention this as their key trait?
So there's a couple of things so far in this, and in my travels kind of around the world. There is an overwhelming drive to want to better people. Right
Mm.
now, that could be themselves or others, but they're always curious on how to be better people, whether it's teaching better people. So I guess probably narrowing it down even further is there's a consistent curiosity, right? A consistent curiosity of how can I help you? How the administrators I talk to, and you talk about a view that you have. When we get off here, Google Leavenworth, Washington, and you will see the Cascade Mountains. And now I've spent a lot of time in New Zealand, and this place, from the pictures, look amazing. This lady was she's a superintendent of the school district there, and same thing. We talk about that curiosity of just always wanting to help others or serve others, and that's probably the other one. Is it's not about you, it's about everybody else, and having that servant mindset of which a lot of coaches do, right? So a lot of coaches have that of it's not about me, it's about you, right? Like, it's you guys get the credit for when we win, and I get the credit for when we lose. And I would say be curious, and just serve others. And I think once any of us, it's what I'm doing. I'm doing a complete shift in my in my career, and it's more about serving others than it is about myself. Like it just doesn't. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll end up giving a talk at your school, and you can show me around, and we'll get to go out and have a nice meal and catch up and talk further. But for me, that's what it's about. It's about connecting and serving others. And how can I pay I've always said, what good is my journey and the pain and the trauma for me to survive and go through all that? What good is it if I can't turn around and pay that to someone else and help them learn and help them grow? So yeah, be curious and serve other people. And if you can get those things to just become subconsciously part of who you are, man, I tell you, I think you'll be okay. And I'll tell you, Mike, this has been, I never know. I never know when I'm going to hop on an interview and do this. I never know how these things are going to go. You never know if you're going to get somebody and I'm sitting here counting it down, and I'm thinking, man, I sure hope they hurry up, and because I'm not going to lie to you, that happens, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but this has been a welcome, because I try not to do a bunch of research beforehand, because I don't want to come in with any preconceived notions
Right.
of you. Now, I will tell you that if I had done that, so Coach Aker, who's at Oklahoma Baptist now, he is easily one of my best friends, and so I've actually been to Oklahoma. So I went,
Have you?
I flew in two seasons ago at the end of the season. This is his first head coaching job, and they're now Division II. They
Oh, are they? I
transitioned.
didn't know that.
Yep. They're D2 now, and he took them to the national tournament last year. They didn't get to go because of COVID and all that, but they got into the national tournament. He's a superstar. He is. He's a phenomenal guy, and so I got to see a little bit of Oklahoma. Not much there. Not going to be honest. I flew into the airport, and then drove out to Shawnee out there, and there was nothing in between.
Yeah. There's not. I've spent a lot of time in that gymnasium, actually.
Oh man, there is nothing out there. So if I would have done some research, I would have called Jay and said, Jay, call Coach Sampson something. Give me some dirt so I can just say something. I can just say something, and he'll be like, "How do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know that?"
Yeah.
But
well,
let me tell you something.
Coach would have had plenty of dirt, so you could have done it. It'd have been funny.
Yeah. Well, maybe when we have you back on, I'll have something. I'll have something good. But Mike, let me tell you, man. This has been an honor, and I appreciate hearing from you. I appreciate hearing your journey. I appreciate you sharing your journey. For many different reasons, but I also appreciate your authenticity. That comes off very much so in how you communicate and how you share, your journey and what you've learned. And what's amazing to me, and this is always the sign of somebody who gets it, is you and I have sat here and talked for an hour, and you've probably talked more about everybody else who's made an impact in your life rather than actually yourself and what you've got going on. Not that either one is right or wrong, but that is a true sign of somebody who's appreciative about that. And I think that means you're going to, like, your people that you encounter, that you motivate, that you teach, that you help, they're going to learn and endure that too. And you're subconsciously sharing that whether you know it or not. So while I don't know you, this is our first time chatting. I definitely want to try and stay in touch. I think, when you meet good people, you try and keep good people around. I can say that community where you're at, that school where you're at, whether they know it or not, they are truly blessed to have somebody like you working there and impacting those young people.
Shane, I really appreciate that. That's real insightful of you. I didn't even think twice about that. And I love that you're spotlighting teachers that are really trying to give back. And that was the common thread that you said, that people are really trying to give back to the community, to the next generation, to progress the narrative. I mean, that means I'm doing something right. And I really appreciate chatting with you. And we can stay connected. And if I can help you in the future, let me know.
I appreciate that. Thank you for waking up every single day and accepting those challenges those young people bring you. Some days are more challenging than others, but I always say on here, educators, you guys bend, you don't break. So thanks so much, Mike. You enjoy the rest of your evening, and I looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks, Shane. Take care.
All right. Cheers.